Stephen, are you there? We'll try to get back to Stephen just as soon as we have him. We believe that he can offer some eyewitness perspective. In the meantime, John, I'm getting early reports that the tail of the plane might have hit the runway and broke off during landing. In fact, one still image that I was shown just moments ago shows the entire back of the plane just literally sitting on the runway. The front of the plane still lifted by the tires of the plane, the wheels underneath it, but the back of the plane just literally resting the fuselage right on the runway. There you see an image there. The right-hand side of your screen would sort of show you the slope of the plane right now.
That would be unprecedented for a 777, and for most of commercial aviation, what that would indicate is a massive force visited, shall we say, on the fuselage of that airplane, which could have been a hard landing. That's pretty much the first thing that comes to mind. If you're going to cause the airframe to literally come apart on the runway, it would have had to have been a pretty heavy plunk down. But of course, as I say, it is totally unprecedented. Now, what scares me is that there are people sitting in the back of that airplane. So how much of the rear end of the, what we call the empennage, the tail section, broke off, and whether or not it took any passenger seats with it is a great concern.
Some terrifying moments, certainly, for the passengers on that plane, even if it is a very survivable crash landing. As you mentioned a short time ago, John, as a plane comes in and there is trouble, certainly the crew, the pilots on that plane doing everything they could, but for the passengers in the back of that plane, as you mentioned, it must have been just a terrifying landing. I want to see if Stephen is with us now. We tried to get you moments ago, Stephen. Can you hear me? It's David Muir in New York.
Yes, I can hear you.
And Stephen, tell me what you saw. Where are you? What did you see?
I'm at the parking lot, the walkway of the bay of Marriott Hotel, where across the bay you could see the planes coming in. I saw the plane coming in, and I thought the body itself, like, it was very, very high, and I thought that was odd, but I thought, well, you know, they do this all the time, they know what they're doing. And so when it was coming down, I thought, okay, it's going to adjust. And all of a sudden, at the back of the plane where the tail is hit, and all of a sudden, off fire, then it looked like a kind of cartwheel, then slid, and that's when the fire started going all over the place. I mean, it did happen so fast, so it was a little fuzzy after that. But that's pretty much what I saw. It was just, I couldn't believe it.
You're at the Marriott right there near the airport, Steve. In the back of the plane, some of the images that we have seen shows the back of the plane literally resting on the runway. Is that what you see?
Yes, it did. It caught fire immediately.
And the billowing smoke, we saw some of the images showing the fire right after the landing. That smoke, obviously large and dark. The live pictures we're seeing now shows that smoke having dissipated. Could you see from your vantage point, Steve, the passengers being rescued from the plane?
I saw the little rafts, you know, the floating rafts on the emergency for the plane, and I couldn't tell if people could get off or not because I couldn't tell if people were getting off. But some people said they did see people getting off.
And Stephen,
I personally did not, but a couple other witnesses said they did look like they did see other people getting off.
Yeah, and we're looking now at pictures, the still images right afterwards, that giant plume of smoke. But as you mentioned, Stephen, you saw the plane coming in, and you thought right away that this looked odd, the relationship of the plane with the runway. What did it look like? Take us slowly through this. As you looked out, saw that plane coming in for a landing, describe the scene.
I arrived when I saw it coming in, at first I go, wow, the body of the nose of the plane was very higher than usual for a plane coming in to land. I thought that was odd, but I thought nothing of it. I thought, well, these guys do it all the time. It's going to adjust properly. But it got closer and closer, and I'm thinking, what? And all of a sudden, I saw the back tail hit the ground. That's when I saw the planes and the smoke and flames come out. I go, oh, my God. And it looked like a kind cartwheel and slid, and that's more fires are coming out. And a couple of people said they had images that said they thought they saw a cartwheel 2 or 3 times. It looked like to me only cartwheel once, but like I said, unfortunately for me, it happened so fast after that I was shaken.
Stephen, I know it's a nerve-wracking thing to witness. We appreciate your account. Stick with us here. I want to get back to John Nance, our aviation consultant. John, you heard Stephen mention there he thought he saw some of those inflatables, the rubber inflatables. And John, as you know, we've covered this many times before. The first, you know, several minutes, you've only got a couple of minutes to get all those passengers off the plane. The first 90 seconds or so, extremely important.
Yes, absolutely. You've got, you know, when we certified these airplanes. They're certified for that standard, and of course they're sitting in a hangar somewhere. By the same token, the capability has been very well demonstrated in past survivable accidents. The thing that is certainly worrisome here is when I hear the airplane was coming in with a high nose-up attitude, hit the tail first, and then I'm unclear what Stephen was saying after that as to whether or not the tail actually broke off and what, if anything, was the dynamic that occurred after that. As I said, when you see these chutes, though, out, those have to be manually deployed by the flight attendants by opening the doors. That indicates that people are actively trying to get off the airplane, and that's what gives me some hope. But I do not have a picture in front of me at the moment, so I'm a little bit handicapped in terms of being able to tell what exactly the physiology of this aircraft was after it hit the runway.
And John, again, tell me about the crew, the training involved. You mentioned it a moment ago about the timing involved after a crash landing, what they know to do to get the passengers off the plane just as quickly as they can.
The crew is actually, in fact, that's one of the things in aviation that has very often been misunderstood by passengers. That the flight attendants are there primarily to get you off the airplane and to keep you safe. Secondarily, they serve food and all this, but for the most part, their training is constant as how to handle it in an accident, even if it's not one that was a known entity. In other words, it wasn't an emergency declared, and something just happens. They know how to open those doors, how to get people out on the rafts, or on the chutes, and how to do it in the most expeditious and safe fashion. And that's because, you know, you and I have talked about this in the past. We try to, in commercial aviation, make people feel like that's their living room, but it's not. It is a potentially life-threatening environment if something goes very wrong, and you need to be able to get out of there rapidly by following the dictates of the crew. But that's where they usually shine. What we don't know here is how much of the airplane remained intact. And as I said, I'm struggling to find a picture here.
We'll get you that image, John, because we're getting a closer live look right now. You're watching ABC News Live special report coverage of an incident unfolding this afternoon at San Francisco's airport. That is a Boeing 777 you're looking at now. And, John, this is the closest picture we've had yet so far this afternoon. A huge part of the fuselage missing from the top of that plane. Some of the descriptions we heard from the eyewitness here a moment ago, Stephen Deere, who said he watched it from the Marriott not far from San Francisco airport, said he believed that plane was tumbling. In fact, he described it as sort of going, you know, over a couple of times, though he said he couldn't be sure. At first, we had reports that just the tail of the plane might have touched down on the runway before the rest of the plane, but the damage to the top of that fuselage is going to bring a lot more questions about what exactly unfolded as that plane came in. For viewers now just joining us, I want to bring you up to speed on what we're covering at this hour. This is a Boeing 777 believed to have taken off from Seoul, South Korea, landing at San Francisco's airport late this afternoon, some sort of a crash landing, according to the FAA. That's been confirmed by the FAA, and of course, we're looking at the live pictures coming in now with help from our ABC station KGO on the scene there. These are the closest pictures yet we've seen of the plane. As you can see, the tail end of the plane resting there on the ground, pieces of the plane surrounding it there on land. A huge part of the fuselage simply ripped off of the plane. And as we heard John Nance tell us a moment ago, just the extreme importance and how these crews are trained in this, trying to get the passengers off the plane just as soon as they can after an incident like this. Early on, John, talking about how perhaps given early word that this might have been survivable by many of these passengers, but we simply do not know that at this hour. What we do know is that there were 290 passengers on board, that 777 is capable of carrying many more. That number could increase, but the number right now we're working with, 290 passengers. It's believed at least one of them was an infant on board. But, John, I want to describe for you, because I know you're coming to us live as well and might not have an eye on what we're looking at. We're looking at live pictures in a huge central part of the fuselage. The top of the plane looks like it's completely off of the plane, a much bigger and more dangerous incident than perhaps many thought early on.
Yeah, David, what you're describing now is getting extremely lethal in terms of potential. And again, I have to tell you that I just have not seen this. It's all been described to me. But with a part of the fuselage off, and the tail apparently removed, and reports of the thing tumbling. I don't know where we are in terms of survivability. As I say, the one thing that I kind of latched onto there was the fact that we had emergency escape chutes out, which is always a good indication. But this is sounding extremely serious, and you know, we can only do this kind of speculation from the very beginning with what we've got coming in, and it's
I've got to tell
unprecedented.
you, yeah, I've got to tell you, John, that as this camera, this fixed camera, I believe what we're seeing are aerials coming in live from our station KGO, and we're now getting a much clearer picture of the devastation. You have a charred out fuselage, the central part of the plane, the roof. It appears to have been burned off of the plane in this fire, the wings. Now, the question, obviously, as we watch this unfold live, is just how many of the passengers, if any, how many of them they were able to get off before the fire that we see right here. Of course, we don't know if that fire broke out on impact. It's simply too early to know. A lot of questions when we have an incident like this. You can see them right now spraying down the plane. To the left there, just part of the rescue team that, John, you were saying, you know, are on call 24/7 at airports across this country, waiting for incidents like this, ready to answer the call. And I want to bring in our viewers who are just joining us now up to speed on this incident unfolding at San Francisco's airport late today. A Boeing 777 operated by Asiana Airlines coming in from Seoul, South Korea, landing at San Francisco's airport right there in the Bay Area. There are fire and rescue people everywhere. There are reports coming in, and there have been many reports on Twitter, and obviously in this age, so much of the information moves at lightning speed. Some of the passengers tweeting that they're watching some of the other passengers being evacuated, that some of the passengers are in fact injured. All of that obviously has to be confirmed by investigators who are right there on the scene. And we heard earlier from an eyewitness at just one of the airports there, right near one of the hotels, I should say, near the airport, Mr. Deere, Stephen Deere, who told me on the air as we were covering this in the early stages that he saw that plane come in, knew immediately that it just didn't look right, that the back of the plane was very close to the runway. He said, just as we saw in the descriptions coming in, the back of the plane resting right on the ground. There were reports that the tail of the plane touched down first, which John told us earlier, John Nance, our aviation expert, that that's simply unprecedented. You don't see that in a landing. Stephen Deere, the eyewitness, said he then saw the plane tumble. Certainly, we do not know that because we simply got reports after the incident happened. And as you're looking live now, you can see the plane simply resting there on the ground off the runway. The most concerning images from the live pictures coming in this afternoon is simply the top of that fuselage burned away, John. And of course, the question is, when did the fire break out? At landing or following the landing? And regardless, it just shows the intense pressure on these crews and the respect we have for them, so trained to get us off so quickly when something like this happens.
And David, let me ask you, if you are seeing a splayed out, basically emergency exit chutes on both sides of the airplane, is that what's in the image?
Yes. Well, we can see, John, the rescue teams there in the foreground, just behind our banner there, showing the rescue team at the side of the plane. You can see water being sprayed at the plane right now. I can actually, well, there you can see the plane door and what appears to be a chute coming out of that front plane door right near the cockpit for viewers at home watching us as well. But John, I got to tell you, from the front row, from the front passenger row all the way back, I'd say a good 3/4 of the plane has the top of the fuselage burned right off.
See, the thing that is giving me a little hope here, David, is that very often what happens when you have a survivable crash and the airplane catches on fire afterwards, people are long since able to get out of the airplane, but what you're describing, what we're seeing, is the aftermath. And yes, these airplanes can burn the roof right off, but hopefully everybody got out before that happened. It's highly unlikely that that kind of damage is commensurate with anything that occurred on the landing itself.
And as I mentioned, John, some tweets coming in from some of the people who witnessed this, and a tweet believed to have been from one of the passengers that said the tail was ripped off, that people seem okay, that some of the passengers, we can't confirm all of them, But if this tweet is to be believed, and we certainly hope so, this would be a passenger who said, I was part of that crash landing, the tail ripped off, everyone seems fine. But of course, we are so tentative in this age of Twitter. Hopefully that can be believed. But I want to bring in Dominic Garcia, who was working at a restaurant nearby right there in San Francisco. And Dominic, you saw what we saw, those early clouds of smoke just billowing in the air from the plane. Tell me more about what you saw right in the moments before and after the landing.
Well, I didn't see it actually hit. It was a split second after. I was helping out a guest, and I just hear everyone scream, and I take a look over, and there's just a huge mushroom cloud. It had to be 100 feet in the air, and it just looked like dust at first, but then, you know, within 15 seconds, it was just black smoke. Just high, a huge cloud, and I'm just standing there watching. You know, I mean, there's nothing you can do when you see something like that. It's just it's heart-wrenching, and you know, and I see maybe a minute later the fire trucks are coming out, because this is at the very edge of the landing strip, the furthest away from the airport. So I see the fire trucks come, and you know, I see the hoses come out, and it looks like, you know, the fire was controlled for a second, and then it got even worse. Like maybe the fuel tank caught fire or something, and I don't know. It's bad. It's not something I really wish anyone to be watching, you know.
Not something anyone ever wants to see. You mentioned the fire trucks, the hoses coming out. Could you see, Dominic, from where you are at that restaurant, any of the passengers being brought off the plane?
It's too far away to see that. Plus, you really couldn't see anything through the smoke. It was a mushroom cloud. It looked like an explosion. Yeah, you know, when I first turned over and looked over, I didn't even realize it was a plane crash. I didn't know what happened. It was just such a big cloud of debris and smoke. But it doesn't look like. I mean, I don't really know from this distance, but it looked bad. You know, I couldn't see any, because it caught fire so quick. You know, I couldn't see much time for people to get out. I mean, I hope for the best, but it looked bad. I mean, the guy, one of the customers I was taking care of, he got a picture. He was taking pictures of the planes coming and going, and got a picture of the plane right before it hit. I mean, it had to be 35-degree angles with the nose pointed up in the air. The tail hit first. The tail, it looks like it's all the way on the other side of the runway.
Yeah, and as we're looking at pictures from the air, Dominic, and you can see the plane is completely off the runway now, right there on the land adjacent to the runway, and an astute observer pointing out that the horizontal and vertical stabilizers on this plane appear to be missing. And John Nance, when you hear that, what does that tell you?
David, I missed the question. Try it again, please.
John, I'm sorry, could you hear me there?
David, I'm sorry, I missed the question. Try it again, please.
The horizontal and vertical stabilizers missing from the plane. You can see parts of them sitting on the runway. Of course, the plane now adjacent to the runway, right off the runway, in fact. But when you hear those stabilizers ripped off the plane, what does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that very likely, just as the eyewitness Stephen told us a while ago, the airplane actually touched down tail first, and the empennage section, as we call it, may have come off entirely of the airplane, and that would indicate that the crew, for some reason, was very, very slow and ended up basically slowing the air and coming down at a precipitous rate of speed with the nose in the air. That, as I say, is unprecedented. The only time that I can think of anything with a 777 having happened like this, it was the British Airways crew in London a number of years back who lost both engines. They wouldn't accelerate, and they were trying to keep the airplane in the air as long as possible. They landed with gear in a muddy field, and it was not tail first. But, of course, it's far too early to speculate on what happened here, but this is certainly not the way you should bring a big airplane like this in. And if it does hit tail first, if there's enough force there, that certainly can literally separate the tail, horizontal and vertical stabilizers from the rest of the airplane fuselage.
And, John, I got to tell you, earlier in our special report coverage, for those of you watching, this is ABC News live coverage of a crash landing at San Francisco's airport today. It involved a Boeing 777 operated by Asiana Airlines. We do know that the counters inside the airport are now closed. The banners over them saying, you know, counter closed. Obviously, that airline dealing with what we see is a fast-moving response to a disaster at San Francisco's airport this afternoon. That plane coming in, believed to have crash landed You can see that it's completely off the runway there. This is a better view now. You can see how far off the runway it is. Aerial pictures coming in from our ABC station KGO, and our thanks to them and the team there on this from the moment they learned. We know that the rescue teams answering the call immediately. We've heard from several eyewitnesses now. Dominic Garcia moments ago, who watched this from a restaurant not far from the airport, said that he saw it from moments after the impact, that quite frankly, he had hoped he would never see something like that. The billowing smoke. He said the fire that broke out on the plane appeared to be under control for just a moment from those rescue crews arriving, but then he said it blew up again, and that the fire was even bigger for a time, and that billowing smoke. We've seen some of the still images, in fact, as this has unfolded. Right now, though, as these live pictures come into us, you can see they're spraying down the plane. Obviously, they want to make sure that there are no more flare-ups. But as we look at these live pictures, and we certainly hope to await word on the passengers. At first reports, there were 290 passengers on board that plane. It's believed that one of the passengers was an infant, and we certainly await word on the condition of those passengers. What's terrifying to look at, quite frankly, is just the sheer evidence of that fire. Now, whether or not the team was able to get people off the plane before the fire burned much of that fuselage away, really from what appears to be, from one of the views you could see from the first row of the plane, you know, 3/4 of the way back. This was no doubt a very intense and fast-moving fire. I want to turn to one of our team members here at ABC News, Arlette Sands, a producer on our team, and she's at San Francisco's airport calling into us. And Arlette, what can you report in?
Well, David, I was pulling into the parking lot at the Marriott, just right across the water from the airport, and I could see the plane, all of the smoke billowing from it. I immediately got out of my car and ran towards the water, and you could see on the streets where I am, police vehicles were streaming down the streets, and then you could shortly after see just a long line of emergency vehicles pulling up to the runway. I spoke with several eyewitnesses who said that they saw the plane kind of teetering as it was coming in for a landing, and what they saw was that the tail or the wing hit the runway. But it's been quite a terrifying scene out here for a lot of the eyewitnesses that saw this happen.
And Arlette, from your vantage point, and I know you're far off too, and that's the challenge for so many of the eyewitnesses reporting in, but from where you are, could you see the rescue effort underway? We can see the front door of the plane there, one of the chutes off of the plane set up there, but obviously we don't know how quickly they were able to get people off this plane. Did you see any of that underway?
I didn't see any of the emergency efforts right away, but several eyewitnesses told me there were people out here that had binoculars, and they could see the emergency slides pop out. But most of the people couldn't see whether anyone came out of those emergency slides. But the plane was just basically engulfed by smoke by the time I got here.
And I want to bring our viewers up to speed on what we're just learning now from ABC News consultant Colonel Stephen Gannard, who's also watching this unfold with us this afternoon. He says that it would appear that the plane was obviously off the runway now, but whether or not it hit short of the runway remains to be determined. But he points out that it looks like it's just along the breakwater, which we know is a barrier against the bay there in San Francisco, where this airport is located. And John Nance, who's been with us every step of the way, as he always is, unfortunately, when there are disasters like this one. What we're looking at, John, right now are aerials coming in, the results of that fire that broke out, whether or not after impact or